there's a fundamental reality about science being messy, and it's not black and white. And in an age of simplification, unfortunately, you can't give you a definitive result when the next pandemic is going to emerge from. It could be next month, or it could be in 10 years' time. So unfortunately, that doesn't help when you're trying to establish the trust and the clarity. But again, I don't have a master plan on how we rebuild, but I do believe that you're not going to do it by UCD acting alone. You're not going to do it by the Irish Times acting alone. And I'm really interested in how sort of collaborations might emerge, and also then to engage with the kind of communities that Mark is referring to. And the one that I'm really intrigued by is communities that are embracing renewable energy. They're just getting on with it. They're not listening to Trump and reinvesting in gas boilers or whatever. They just recognize the fundamental truth of it. They're working together against adversity. Often the time might be they're living in a rural area where extreme weather is the norm, and yet they're enhancing their engagement with their people locally and in delivering renewable energy at scale. So there's a very small example of how it can be done. I was involved in assessing projects this year in terms of community impact, and that was the one thing that stood out. And I could see it. The elements of it were such that you could scale that not just to every county in Ireland, but to every country, in Europe, possibly not the United States at the moment. But there are mechanisms there, and it's how you feed those communities, how you build engagement with those communities. And like, I spend a lot of time sort of defending the Irish Times. We're not the establishment, even though we're accused of that. And because we've the war wounds in terms of standing up to big business or whatever, and trying to survive, without, we don't have any external funding or anything like that. We get our funding for our readers fundamentally, and some from advertising. So therefore, we have an authenticity in terms of relations to so many of those communities.
That's right. So these questions of engagement, collaboration, Shane, you had half a hand raised there. Can I go to you next?
Absolutely. My colleagues here from UCD will have heard me speak recently about our moonshot for engagement. I think unless universities realize in Europe that what's happening in the United States, and to some extent Britain, is absolutely going to happen here too, unless we get ahead of it. I think, like many things in Ireland, we often have the benefit of a slight lag. So I believe that in Ireland and in Europe more generally, that universities must take great action if we're to survive. So that I think universities in Ireland, I was thinking about it today when I heard Kevin Backhurst's report to the media committee to the Oireachtas. Everything there has been reduced down to accountability and governance. And he mentioned the word trust in his response to the inquisitors. But at no point do I see trust being used as an organizing principle for RTE or any other big organization for that matter. So I think that we must be extremely aspirational in our thinking, and I'm not afraid to break old ways of doing things with a view to looking for where we want our liberal society to be in 50 or 100 years, and to start having those public conversations and recognizing the power that we have, albeit soft power, as public institutions to try and host those conversations. And so when I think about a moonshot for UCD, I think that means that we have to radically reimagine how we engage with the society that gives us social license to operate, because the 1950s model of come to university, get a degree and get a start in life is no longer, that equation doesn't make sense anymore. So I think we need a radical change. And I think it's one that we could engage with the public in a very, very meaningful way, and ideally be to a far more authentic engagement with the public that we serve.
Well, thinking about public engagement, collaboration, that?
I mean, I think, the other way of, I suppose, is you've got to start from another way of looking at it is it's audiences, isn't it? That you've got to build these institutions and run these institutions all in service of audiences. And I know that sounds like what some people have probably been thinking that they've been doing, or some organizations have been thinking they've been doing. But at the end of the day, that probably hasn't been the case. And especially, I think, when we look into newsrooms, still there's far too much siloing of, let's say, audience research. The audience research might be done, it might be excellent, might be focus groups or surveys or other forms of really understanding what your audience needs you to do, what they want you to be, what they would see as value, how they want you to serve them. But too often, editorial teams lean back on gut instinct, or something that sort of, is a line of defense quite often, that our editorial judgment is better than any sort of audience insight that could be provided. So I think we've really got to, know your audiences, map your audiences, spend some time thinking about who are those early, I suppose, the influential audiences, the beachhead, whatever you want to call them. Who are the people who are going to do some of that work for you? We've talked an awful lot about fragmentation, but just to say it, really clearly, that era of reaching mass audiences without sort of a very large portfolio of products is behind us. So there's an affordability question then about who you can afford to reach, what your resources are to reach them with. So you've got to be very intentional about who it is that you're looking for. And I don't think you can get there unless you've done that audience mapping work to know who it is that you're looking for, so that you're engaging in the right way and you're not just sort of spewing lots of content out into the world, just overwhelming people even more than they already are.
Or you give a great deal of thought to where audiences reside. You help advise people on how to find them. Can you advise us here?
Well, I think to start from go back to our public square that collapsed, right? What goes into place? I think a lot about the words shared reality, right? But I don't think it's important that all of us in a nation agree and trust the same amount in sources of information. I think it's much more important is that we think about this moment as kind of an ecology moment. I mean, I feel there's a lot of parallels with the climate crisis and how we all came together as civic society, education, and the media to a certain extent to think about what kind of internet we want to rebuild now that we have another inflection moment. And so, for example, I think a lot about the idea that we should stop thinking about journalism, or even PSMs as they're called. I was on the Future of Media Commission, and we wanted to say the very first sentence was, information is a critical public utility, just like water, just like education. Now, if you start from that point, you no longer have to build public trust in 500,000 people turning up for an edition of prime time. Now you have a clear idea. Now, what is the source of that information? Well, we have some institutions that still exist, thankfully, in public media. Trust is actually very high, despite all of the stuff that's happened recently here in the public service media providers. We have an incredible facility, for example, in Wikipedia, which is the very essence of the kind of collaborative platform that we've had before. We have tremendous institutions like the Associated Press, a cooperative movement that began in the 1840s that is now supplying all this clean information to companies within AI who want to solve their hallucination problem and have sources of critical public information within their agents. Now, that in itself is a danger, but it's also a potential opportunity. So I think a lot about what do we all do if, for example, take your point, Shane, we don't have to build LLMs. We could build a small model in this university that was maybe open source, but was working on proprietary data sets in the university. That model itself could talk to other models. In Switzerland, they have a national large language model. These are the forms of innovation that once we take our blinkers off and start imagining an alternative internet, start to become ready for us, I think, and that's a broad level. Specifically on engagement, I would watch a couple of things and see how you can accelerate these trends. The first thing is, within a couple of years, the social media feeds as they are will be bankrupt. They will be a place that people go and they frolic in all the AI-generated content. They will lose their power as information sources. I think you're already seeing people moving then into other platforms. Some of them we call the dark forests. These are your WhatsApp chat groups. If you can find your way into those kind of groups, you have already huge high levels of strong ties and social trust. We're starting to see the emergence of a federated media model. We have legislation that's going to give you the ability to leave any platform, any social platform, and take your followers with you. and then go and choose your own content moderation service, then connect with information sources that can, like old RSS, feed into you. So there's a decentralization of power that we see in many publics within democracy, for example, citizens' assemblies, citizen juries, matched by a rush toward a new community on the internet, building those communities. And if you think about it, in the end of the day, that itself is a huge opportunity for each one of us to be convening our own community, whether it's in a group chat, or it's on Reddit, or it's on Mastodon or Blue Sky, or whatever replaces them in the future. Most of all, you have agency. This is the beginning of a movement, I would argue, an ecology movement to rewild the internet in the image of the communities that need people like you.
How does, looking toward you, Kate, because I'm wondering, I love what you're saying. I really genuinely do, but I'm wondering, how do I gauge that as an academic? How does an institution, maybe not the most flexible of institutions, a big university, how do we...
I keep forgetting to use this very simple thing called a mic. I apologize.
Can I ask for a quick answer to that question? If you look at the influencers that are really connecting right now, so for example, there's someone called News Daddy, 19-year-old guy in England. He aggregates all the news from all the traditional sources. He has a bigger audience on TikTok than the entire combined nightly news audience in the United States. 3 networks, right? Now, he basically has a certain authenticity we talked about. What younger people are looking for is affinity. This is just someone like me, but smarter. Transparency. Have you anything in your background that would make you give me wrong advice? Accountability. You got something wrong, you own up to it, and we'll move on. And that sense of affinity, authenticity, transparency, accountability, we're the people that are already suited for that kind of influence and that kind of engagement. And we can do it, on a Substack or on Beehive, the alternative. There's lots of open tools. Just start. The Kevin Kelly, the original one of the pioneers, he always had that great, find your 1,000 true fans. You just have to find a couple of hundred people and grow that community like you would grow a public garden. I would argue that once you have those qualities of trust, as the influencers do, you have a piece of property that you're rewilding for a community that could benefit from your research and your expertise. That's the beginning of everything. And I would argue the same for big media as well as people in the room here today.
So, Kate, can a large institution like this rewild in this way, or at least run with these ideas?
Yes, so to a certain extent, I can only speak for UCD here, we're already traveling part of that journey. So we have an AI strategy developing, which is facilitating, for example, a sandbox mechanism for staff to engage in creating, if you like, chatbots that sit on top of proprietary information within the university, and thinking about how we might manage our data storage, federated or otherwise, to facilitate the building of RAG systems on which agents could sit that would kind of do have some of the functions that I think you're describing. But more widely than that, we're really interested in having a UCD now and in the future, which is porous, where the boundaries are porous, where that engagement with the communities we serve is more than one way, where it goes both ways. But I think then we also have to recognize that we may be asked for things we do not expect, and for levels of participation or engagement which are unfamiliar to us, and we must be prepared to work with that. And that is, that's a thought experiment I don't think we've quite got to the end of yet, but I'm certainly really interested in. And we're I was actually, you mentioned Switzerland, so I had the real privilege of being part of the advisory committee and Turing Institute that was underpinned the first exploration of Switzerland into the LLMs, and they have a very particular national mission to develop their own kind of digital resilience, separated from the multinationals, including cloud services and everything. Now, we could, as a nation, go down that route. We could stage it in other ways, so that there are kind of other moments where we could retract from that because the financial commitment is so great. But I think institutions like UCD, and obviously we're not the only one, are really well placed to be places where we can host these kinds of debates and conversations, and think about how we create the structures digital and in real life, that will facilitate that kind of communal vision setting that we all, I think, we all certainly on this panel think that we should be aiming toward.
Thank you for that. We're coming to the end of this section before we move into some questions that we've been sent forward from the audience. But I want to go more immediately here. My very poor eyesight to, sorry, it's Ethne, isn't it? Ethne, apologies. I can just about see that front row here. You are a really good person to go to this point because you've been journalist in residence run by the UCD Earth Institute. So really just bringing that same question to you, what are your insights, in other words? What have you learned from the residency process, or in relation to our conversation here, how has it enabled you to connect with subjects, to connect with audiences differently?
I guess in some ways it's good just because there's no pressure when you're doing it, unlike most of the time when you're a journalist and something happens. Like, for example, there's a big storm and there's flooding and you want your expert right away. You get much more time to kind of ask intelligent questions in when there isn't a news deadline you're kind of running up against. And hopefully in the future that means that I will ask intelligent questions quickly when that is required of me, and also that an academic would understand exactly why I'm asking those questions and what I need to know.